A major decision will be taken this weekend by the Economic Community of West African States as the regional body will be having summits to determine what happens to Niger as a result of the coup d'etat. It was also a week of deal-making for Nigeria at the COP 2003, COP 28. All of this we'll be talking about on the show. Welcome to Standpoint. I am Ademola Lawrence. The next summit of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, will be, of course, after a series of recent military coups will take place on December 10th, which is, of course, in Abuja tomorrow. The last summit took place at the beginning of August and was entirely devoted to the situation in Niger Republic, following the military coup of July 26 that overthrew elected President Mohamed Bazoum, who has been, of course, in the residence in Niamey. The head of state had threatened military intervention to restore President Bazoum to office and impose heavy economic financial sanctions on Niger, ruled by a military regime led by General Abdul Rahman Tani. And of course, of the 15 member countries of ECOWAS, 4 have been ruled since 2020 by military leaders following coup d'etat. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Guinea, all have seen been suspended from the organization and will therefore not be represented at the Abuja summit. The first 3 countries plagued by jihadist violence have formed an alliance of Sahel states. An attempted coup in Sierra Leone also was about to take place by the ECOWAS member state, but of course it never succeeded. Interesting discussion we're going to be having today. And of course I'm joined by a retired foreign service Iliyasu Gadu. We'll be talking about all of these things, majorly the Economic Community of West African States Summit tomorrow, and the major focus, of course, will be the Niger Republic. What is the sanction going to be like? Remember, back in August, the ECOWAS said the sanctions, we put some sanctions in place that if the power is not restored back to the democratic elected president, some things will happen. Good afternoon and welcome to the show, Mr. Iliyasu. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Good afternoon, viewers. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so let's just, almost everybody knows, okay, what the issue is in Niger. But first, let's first look at the ECOWAS summit that will happen tomorrow. After the president of Côte d'Ivoire actually announced in a press statement that the summit will happen tomorrow. And the major focus, of course, will be Niger. But first of all, let's lay a foundation of what the summit might probably look like tomorrow and some of the things that ECOWAS is going to be looking at in terms of economic policies and governance thereabouts.
Okay, once again, good afternoon, viewers. I think what the ECOWAS summit will be looking at tomorrow will be, of course, the issue of Niger and Mali and Burkina Faso. And, of course, we know what all these things is all about. It's about the truncation of democracy in these countries and the issues arising out of that. And, of course, you know, when the coup took place on July 26 in Niger, and the president or former president of the country, Mohamed Bazoum, was ousted, ECOWAS ramped up its condemnation of what happened in Niger, because it happened in Burkina Faso, in Mali, and it's like it's going to be a kind of spiral effect. So they took the actions in Niger, which is to say that, look, we are going to, apply some sanctions to Niger to show our displeasure at what is happening in that area, not just in Niger, but what has happened before Niger. And now, of course, between that time and now, quite a lot of things have happened. We have lapsed into a dangerous stalemate, whereby, ECOWAS pronouncements on restoring democracy in Niger and even in Mali and Burkina Faso has gone unheeded. And so between that time and now, a lot of things have happened, dangerous things have happened, which requires the ECOWAS heads of state to sit down and review the situation and look at what options to take. For instance, we know, for instance, now that, the three countries, that's Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, have, gone ahead to try to form a kind of, a union or a confederation whereby the three of them will come together and form some kind of alliance of Sahel states, that's what they call it. And afterwards, they will now begin to form a confederation on economic, diplomatic, and military matters. Now, that is the dangerous escalation we have. And we've also have a situation whereby in these countries, there have been, a lot of happenings that tend towards, challenge to the military authorities there. In Niger, for instance, we have credible intelligence or credible reports that it is now a matter of regime protection rather than national protection. And by that, I mean they have, sort of withdrawn all the soldiers that are supposed to fight and protect the country, to protect the regime in Niamey. So what you have now is a situation where the military junta in Niger and much also in Mali and Burkina Faso are more interested in protecting themselves than facing up to the dangers that this country faces from insurgent groups like ISIS and the rest of them. So it's actually the dangerous stalemate that we have, because ECOWAS made pronouncements to the effect that they would like to see a restoration of democracy in these countries. And because it has not followed, so to speak, its pronouncements, it has given rise to a number of issues that have become dangerous to the sub-region. I recall, for instance, recently there was a coup attempt in Sierra Leone, another coup attempt in Guinea-Bissau. So these are issues that really the ECOWAS summit, I keep saying ECOWAS summit would look at and review and realize what to do from here. Because if we allow it to go on, it could escalate into a situation where ECOWAS itself might not be able to cope with. So this is the time that we need to take a decisive stand on what to do in these three countries. Otherwise, we may just find ourselves in situations that would be very dangerous for the sub-region and even for the states themselves. So this is something that I think would engage the attention of the ECOWAS heads of state, and they better do something about it before it gets out of hand.
Okay, Mr. Iliyasu, I'm just going to show you something. If you look at how these countries, at times that the military junta started, the coup d'etat was started. For example, Mali was in 2020, Guinea was in 2021, Burkina Faso was in 2022, Niger 2023, Gabon 2023, and you now have Sierra Leone almost succeeded in 2023 as well, and Guinea-Bissau, the two also joined in 2023, but they didn't succeed. Now, if you look at all these countries, there seems to be like an alliance between them. That's what we talk about, the Sahel alliance. And of course, they have formed forces joined together. That means that these countries are finding solace in one part. Now, ECOWAS, on the other part, says that put sanctions on this country for them to come back into democracy, or they should return the elected president. So my question is, how do, on one hand, ECOWAS is giving sanctions, telling this other hand that come back, but this other hand is already with the other forces, the Sahel forces. How do they want to, how does that correlate? What exactly is ECOWAS going to be doing to, maybe to reduce the sanctions, or how do this really would work?
Well, we all know what happened when the military coup took place in Niger. ECOWAS, under the aegis of Nigeria, which our president became the chairman of the ECOWAS Council of Heads of States, some sanctions were slapped on Niger, mainly the cutting off of electricity and the closing of the border to, to stop movement of goods, movement of services, movement of people, effectively to cut off Niger and to ensure that Niger feels the heat of the sanctions. But again, having done that, nothing, very few credible steps were taken. By credible, I mean, yeah, there was a threat of a military intervention to restore democracy in Niger, but then there were no details spelled out on how these actions were going to take place. Apart from the cutting off of electricity supplies to Niger and the closure of the border, nothing concrete in terms of follow-up was done. And then the regime, dug in. We allowed the regime to dig in, and then to ensure that it made it difficult for ECOWAS to try and see even if they are going to use the military option to make it difficult for ECOWAS. They sort of dug in. ECOWAS, sorry, I keep saying ECOWAS. So right now, because of lack of follow-up in terms of credible efforts, diplomatic, and even follow-up on the pronouncement made. I don't want to use the word threat. On the pronouncement made, so the regime found itself, in a situation whereby it had all the aces, and then at the end of the day, it dug in, and then it's holding the people of Niger hostage in the fact that, in the sense that, it now took care of the military situation, and then ensured that the people out there are not, involved in the decision making. The decision making to protect the country under the aegis of the democratic principles, but the whims and caprices of the regime. So they have dug in now, and they're even doing their own counter diplomatic measures. Some of the countries, for instance, are now, the three countries have now come together to try to form a military alliance and to state that whatever happens to any of them would be would also attract the action from the two others. So effectively making themselves a bulwark against whatever military action that will be taken by ECOWAS. And also there has been a heightened cooperation and collaboration between them economically, militarily, and strategically. Now, ECOWAS has monitored all this. ECOWAS has monitored all this development without going into the next step. Now, if we want to embark on a military action to remove this government or these juntas and then restore democracy, what are the details? How are we going? What are the forces? What are the assets we are going to deploy to ensure that this action is carried out? In the meantime, they have found a way of sidetracking the sanctions on them. They have now found that they have now made themselves comfortable at the expense of the people that are suffering from the sanctions. So, well, in the case of Niger, the president Abdurrahman Chiani, transferred his family to Dubai, and some of his cronies did the same thing. So they have taken care of themselves, and then they are not bothered about what will happen to the people, because already they are, they are taking care of their families. They are taking care of their own immediate comfort, to the detriment of the people. Now, ECOWAS has made pronouncement to the effect that it was going to intervene. We have not seen anything to that effect. Any credible move towards that effect. And that has allowed the junta or the juntas to take the initiative. We also hear that they are actually, making moves into some of the major ECOWAS countries, trying to influence public opinion. In effect, trying to create a psychological atmosphere in some of these countries that will be sympathetic to them and to their stay there. But they have not come out to tell the whole world what they intend to do in terms of what is required of them, in terms of restoring democracy, and in the case of Niger, in terms of releasing President Bazoum. So ECOWAS is in a bind now to intervene or not to intervene. If you are going to intervene, how are you going to intervene? Are you going to go all out for a military assault on the junta, or are you going to seek other means? This has not been spelled out. And in the middle of all this, we see a dangerous stalemate. And this stalemate must not be allowed, because now they are emboldened. They are trying to take countermeasures to try to see how they could put pressure on ECOWAS, so that ECOWAS would not continue to put pressure on them to be able to restore democracy, which is the principal, demand on this military government. And if you don't do something about it, we risk having the military interventions in this country to become a cancerous tumor in West Africa, in the sub-region. And you can see what has happened in the Sierra Leone. Hello?
Okay, let me jump in here. You say necessary measures need to be taken into consideration. That's why I asked the question. If ECOWAS is saying that come back to democracy, or you are also putting restrictions. Obviously, when you come back to democracy, we'll lift up the restrictions. So what happens to the agreements that those countries have made with the other party? What happens? Are they going to also forfeit it, or they are going to go ahead with it? To answer, so when you answer that question, my next question is, what has the dynamic of this? What has it done to the to the diplomatic relation between ECOWAS countries?
Well, definitely at this point in time, the diplomatic relations between them has lapsed into something of a rupture. The ECOWAS committee, the ECOWAS states definitely are not happy with what is happening in these countries. And there's been a lot of, exchanges in terms of, in terms of what needs to be done in those countries. The principal thing is ECOWAS is insisting, ECOWAS, not just ECOWAS, but AU, the UN, and the EU, and other international bodies are requesting, in fact, demanding that there should be a restoration of democracy. Now, these countries, and the whole world actually is looking on ECOWAS to do that, because ECOWAS is the regional body that is more or less in charge of the area, and ECOWAS is looking onto Nigeria, because we have the border with Niger, and we also have the largest military contingent. If there's going to be a military intervention in Niger, definitely it has to, the contingent of the forces will come from Nigeria. A major part of the forces will come from Nigeria. And at the same time, the assets, the platforms that will be used in intervening there will come from Nigeria. So the whole world is looking on Nigeria to do it. But then there are a lot of issues in Nigeria that also will have to consider. And that's why, you see, you have to look at, the issue actually is compartmentalized into 4 issues. First, there is the ECOWAS interest. Then the second, there is the Nigerian interest. Then there is a French interest. Then there is American interest. Now, there has to be a convergence of all these 4 before we could have, a move into Niger. Because if we do not have that...
Mr. Iliyasu, I like the fact that you just even brought that up. Yeah, I like the fact that you just even brought that up, because that's where my next conversation is. If Niger is saying that, the French are taking their resources and taking it to fund their own economy, which is, of course, that is what they are also fighting for. Now, ECOWAS on the other side seems to have a backup from the United States of America. So how do we solve all of this? That's to put it into that the foreign forces behind these kind of things that happen, because everybody has interest. So where is the interest of Nigerians?
Okay, as I said, there are four principal interests involved in what is happening in Niger. There is the ECOWAS interest, which is to restore democracy and stability within the region and not allow coups to take place, because it will destabilize the region. Then there is the issue, the interest of Nigeria, which is that we have a long border with this country. We also have historical, social, and cultural relations. How do you get into this sort of quagmire without affecting yourself, affecting the people, 7 states that border and that have historical relations with this country? And also the collateral damage that may occur in the effort to intervene militarily, because Nigeria will be like the frontline state if you are going to have a military intervention in Niger. The staging point for the troops movement into Niger will be from Nigeria. The contingent, the heavy lifting actually will be done by Nigeria. The French, of course, they have commercial relations. They have relations with, they used to have, relations with Niger. They have also a lot of, interest in minerals there, mine there, and all that. And there's historical relations there too. The Americans have drone base there for which they now deploy to use this not just within Niger, but also in the area, not just within the sub-region, but in Africa and beyond, Central Africa and beyond. So these are the 4 interests there. Now, if ECOWAS has to intervene in Niger, or Nigeria has to intervene in Niger, we have to be able to come to terms with the interests of the Americans and the interests of the French. And from what I know, the interests of the French and the interests of the Americans in Niger do not align. The interests of because the Americans, if you notice at the beginning of the issue, Americans were a bit reticent. They were not too gung-ho about going into Niger. In fact, it took them a long time to even, recognize it as a coup. They were dilly-dallying about whether, to consider it as a coup or not, because of their interests and the French did not converge. But at the same time now, we have a problem on our hands. Niger has become an elephant in the ECOWAS shop. We need to get them out because of the contagion that Niger could be, and Niger and the other countries could be if something is not done. We cannot allow them to be able to be comfortable to the point where they will set up their own, alliance, and then, of course, threaten the entire democratic setup in the sub-region. But then, how do we go about it? How do we go about it? We've made threats, we've made pronouncements on cutting off electricity supply, cutting off, closing the borders, and also making the option of military intervention putting it across the table. But then, how long can we continue? We have reached a point of stalemate in those pronouncements, which now, has, within the time, it has emboldened these countries to try to say, well, since it's going to be difficult for these countries to come to, for this interest to come to an agreement on what to do, then we can just sit pretty and then continue. But in the meantime, let me inform you that a military regime always creates problems within itself. 80% of the military coups we have in Africa are military against military. So when you have a military, the longer a military stays in power, the more it has issues of instability within itself. So along the line, down the line, those countries are going to have instability issues even amongst themselves. In fact, there was an attempted coup sometime in Burkina Faso and in Mali. And I believe that in the case of Niger, that also is going to be a possibility. That's why they have now withdrawn all the military assets and all the military personnel they have along the borders, facing up to ISIS, facing the terrorists, back to Niamey, the capital, to protect the regime from being toppled or from internal actions within the military. This is what a military regime in any part of the world creates. And that is why it is not a sustainable thing.
Mr. Iliyasu,
yes.
I want to get you right. When you said that the interest for an headway to come, for there to be an headway, that means that the interest of the America and the interest of French must be put into consideration. So where lies the interest of the people of Niger? Because they are the bone of contention. What is going to happen to them? Because everybody is fighting. What is it? Everybody wants something to take out from there. So where lies their own interest?
Definitely the interest of the people of Niger, and I would believe the interest of the people of West Africa as a whole, is to have democratic governments that are accountable to the people. In this case, what we have here in Niger and in these other countries that have had military juntas, what we have is a forcible truncation of the democratic will of the people for whatever reasons they have cited. And now they are being ruled by a conclave of military personnel who do not necessarily consult with them. And whereas there have been issues, there have been questions, there have been answers about, need to take care of the national interests and all that, but that can be done through the democratic means. Because if you do not take the people's interests into consideration and you try to, you try to take only your own interest, the interest of the military into consideration, you run into a lot of problems. That is what is happening in Niger. The Niger people are the ones bearing the brunt of the sanctions by ECOWAS. The Niger people are the ones being ruled by Fiat. The Niger people are the ones who do not have a say in what the government is doing on their behalf. Now, that is not right. That is not proper. They need to be able to say, yes, this is what we have, this is what we want, this is how we want it done, and this should be the way that it should be done. But then the military has taken over the government, and it is not even reflecting the wishes of the people. It's now into a situation whereby it's more interested in protecting itself in power than in even taking care of the issues of the people.
Mr. Iliyasu,
so in that respect...
Yeah, just one more moment, because I need to round up the conversation very soon. I wish I had more time. As we round up this conversation, what should ECOWAS do tomorrow? Because now it is very important that a decision must be taken, for the interest of the people of Niger. And what does this also mean, politically, economically, for ECOWAS and of course Africa as a whole, in taking a very good decision that will favor the people of Niger? What are we expecting? What do you think?
Well, I expect that when the ECOWAS heads of state meet tomorrow, they should make a firm declaration that the truncation of civilian democratic regimes in West Africa will not be tolerated. What I mean firm, I mean backed up with credible pronouncements of what to be done. And we must make sure that, and they must make sure that the incipient development of juntas trying to, more or less desperate junta government trying to protect themselves at the expense of the people is not allowed. They must make it clear to the governments of Niger, government of Burkina Faso, government of Mali, government of Guinea, and to other militaries out there who are thinking about going the same way, that their action will not be tolerated and that democracy would ultimately triumph over military dictatorship. That is what the ECOWAS, I keep saying ECOWAS force has to do, and it has to go the next stage. Staying where they are now will not help anybody, will not help Niger people, will not help the people of West Africa. They must call on this government, they must call on all the support of the international community to say, look, we are determined to restore democracy in West Africa. We don't have the assets. We need you to help us, and we need you to come in strong on this. We need you to sort of collapse your interests in the interest of West Africa and the interest of democracy. That is what happened in Iraq and in other places where there was a resolve by governments around the world to stop this issue of aggressive behavior by countries that are stronger than their neighbors. We should do the same thing in West Africa and in Africa, as a matter of fact, because we cannot have military regimes intrinsically are not sustainable. They do not sustain themselves. Along the line, they cause instability within the country and within the sub-region. We must make it clear, and what is preventing us from doing, we don't have the assets, we must tell the people of the world that, look, we are resolved towards making sure that coups that are happening in Africa should not happen, and we need their support, materially, diplomatically, and all of it, so that we can now roll back this issue of trying to get juntas, truncating governments here and there, and then the dominoes will stop falling. Otherwise, we're going to wake up and it's going to continue to be a contagion. It's a cancer that must be removed from the body of Africa and the world.
All right. Thank you very much. Of course, everybody agrees that military should not be in governance. It's a known fact. Should not be in governance. And West Africa is not finding it funny at this particular time. We hope that when ECOWAS meets tomorrow, they will be able to take a decisive decision on that particular matter. Niger, most especially, for example, will be their focus. Thank you very much, Mr. Iliyasu, for joining us on the show. I wish we had more time to talk more, but we'll get you back some other time to also talk some of these things. Thank you very much.